Princess Vale Ithana Soraiketh stood alone near the tall windows of the greeting hall. Outside, ships moved slowly through the darkness of space. Lights blinked on distant stations. Stars burned cold and far away. She had seen this view 1,000 times before. It no longer held any wonder for her. She was the 7th daughter of Emperor Kothmaven of the Netherian Empire. In the long history of her people, 7th daughters did not matter. They were too far from the throne to have power. They were too royal to have freedom. They existed in a strange middle place where they belonged nowhere and to no one. Vale Ithana was 312 years old. In all that time, she had learned one truth above all others. She was invisible. Not in body, of course. Her body was tall and thin, with pale blue skin that shimmered like moonlight on water. Her eyes were large and silver, and her hair fell past her shoulders like strands of white silk. She looked like a princess. She dressed like a princess. She walked and spoke and smiled like a princess. But no one ever saw her. At diplomatic events, ambassadors would bow to her and then turn away before she finished speaking. At family gatherings, her own brothers and sisters would call her 7th instead of her name. Her father, the emperor, had not spoken directly to her in 47 years. She was a tool for small tasks. She was sent to greet minor delegations. She was placed at the far ends of long tables. She was given rooms in the distant wings of palaces. She had stopped feeling pain about this long ago. Pain required hope. And hope required the belief that things could change. Vale Ithana had no such belief. This was simply her life. This was simply who she was. The forgotten princess. The invisible daughter. The one whose name no one remembered. Today, she had been given another small task. A new species had sent their first diplomatic mission to the Galactic Assembly. They called themselves humans, and they came from a small blue planet called Earth, in an unremarkable corner of the galaxy. The reports said they were primitive. Their technology was centuries behind the great empires. Their ships were slow. Their weapons were weak. They had only recently discovered faster-than-light travel, and they had done so by accident. No important royal would waste time greeting such a species. So the task had fallen to Vale Ithana. She did not mind. She had greeted hundreds of minor delegations over the centuries. The pattern was always the same. She would speak the formal words of welcome. The visitors would bow. They would forget her name before they left the room. She would return to her quarters alone. Nothing would change. The doors of the greeting hall opened with a soft sound. Vale Ithana turned and watched the humans enter. There were 5 of them. They wore simple uniforms of dark blue with silver markings. They walked close together, looking around the hall with wide eyes. They seemed nervous and excited at the same time, like children entering a grand building for the first time. The one at the front was a man of medium height, with brown skin and dark hair that was turning gray at the sides. He had lines around his eyes from smiling, and he carried a small leather notebook in one hand. He looked at everything with great interest, even the simple decorations on the walls. Vale Ithana stepped forward and raised one hand in the formal gesture of greeting. "Welcome to the Galactic Assembly," she said in the common trade language. "I am Princess Vale Ithana Soraiketh of the Netherian Empire, 7th daughter of Emperor Kothmaven. On behalf of my people and all the species of this assembly, I greet you and wish you peace." She expected the usual response, a quick bow, a few polite words. Then they would look past her, searching for someone more important. But the man at the front did something strange. He stopped walking. He tilted his head slightly, like someone listening to a beautiful piece of music. And then he spoke. "I'm sorry," he said. "Could you say your name again? Slower this time, if you don't mind. I want to make sure I get it right." Veilethana blinked. No one had ever asked her to repeat her name before. No one had ever wanted to get it right. For a moment, she did not know what to say. "My name," she said slowly, "is Veilethana Soraiketh." The man opened his leather notebook. He pulled a small writing tool from his pocket, and he wrote something down, moving his hand carefully across the page. "Veilethana Soraiketh," he repeated, looking at what he had written. His pronunciation was not perfect, but it was close, much closer than most species ever managed. "That's a beautiful name. Does it mean something in your language?" Veilethana felt something strange in her chest, a flutter, like a small bird trying to fly. No one had ever asked about the meaning of her name. "It means light that returns after darkness," she said. "It is an old name, not used much anymore." The man smiled warmly. "I like it. I'm Danny Cortez, by the way. Ambassador Danny Cortez, officially, but just Danny is fine. I'm the head of Earth's first delegation to the Assembly." He gestured at the people behind him. "This is my team. We're all very happy to be here." He put his notebook away and looked at her with genuine attention. Not through her. Not past her. At her. "Princess Veilethana," he said. "Thank you for taking the time to welcome us. I imagine someone in your position has many important duties. We are honored that you came to meet us personally." Veilethana did not know how to respond. No one had ever thanked her before. No one had ever called her duties important. No one had ever felt honored by her presence. She completed the formal greeting ceremony. She showed the humans to their quarters. She answered their many questions about the station, the assembly, and the other species they would meet. The entire time, Danny Cortez listened carefully to everything she said. He asked follow-up questions. He wrote things in his notebook. When she mentioned that she had an interest in stellar cartography, he asked her to recommend good places on the station where he could see the stars. At the end of the meeting, he shook her hand. This was apparently a human custom. His hand was warm and his grip was firm. "Thank you again, Princess Veilethana," he said. "I hope we'll see each other again soon." She walked back to her quarters alone, as always. But something felt different. Something had shifted inside her, though she could not name what it was. She told herself it meant nothing. The humans were a minor species. They would be forgotten by the assembly within a year. And they would certainly forget her. Just like everyone else did. She was sure of it. 3 months passed, like water flowing through fingers. The Galactic Assembly continued its endless work of treaties and trade agreements and political arguments. Species came and went. Delegations arrived and departed. The great machine of interstellar politics turned slowly forward, as it had for 10,000 years. Veilethana had not thought about the humans since their first meeting. She had returned to her normal life of small duties and empty rooms. She had greeted 4 more minor delegations. She had attended dozens of events where no one spoke to her. She had eaten hundreds of meals alone in her quarters, watching the stars through her window. The humans had probably forgotten her by now. Everyone always did. Tonight was the centennial celebration of the Korvathi-Netherian Peace Accord. It was one of the largest diplomatic events of the year. Hundreds of species filled the grand hall of the assembly station. The room was vast, with ceilings so high they disappeared into shadow. Crystal lights floated in the air like captured stars. Music played from hidden speakers, soft and elegant. Servants moved through the crowd carrying trays of food and drink from 100 different worlds. Velathana stood near a viewport at the edge of the room. She wore a formal gown of deep purple that marked her as Netherian royalty. Her silver eyes reflected the lights around her. She looked beautiful and untouchable, like a painting on a wall. No one approached her. No one ever did. She watched the crowd move and shift. She saw her oldest sister laughing with a group of Korvathi nobles. She saw her father standing on a raised platform, accepting praise and compliments from important ambassadors. She saw her brothers making deals and alliances in quiet corners. Her family shone like suns at the center of attention. Velathana stood in shadow, forgotten. She had attended over 600 events like this one. The pattern was always the same. She would arrive. She would stand alone. She would leave when the crowd began to thin. No one would notice her arrival or her departure. She was a ghost, moving through a world of the living. She thought about leaving early. Her quarters were quiet, at least. She had books there and star charts and the comfortable silence of solitude. There was no point in staying here, surrounded by people who did not see her. She was about to turn toward the doors when a voice cut through the noise of the crowd. "Princess Velathana Soraiketh!" The voice was warm and clear. It spoke her name loudly, without shame or hesitation. Every syllable was pronounced correctly. The sounds rolled through the air like music. Velathana froze. Her heart stopped beating for a moment. She turned slowly, afraid that she had imagined it. Danny Cortez walked toward her through the crowd. He wore a simple dark suit with a small pin on his chest that showed the flag of Earth. His leather notebook was tucked under one arm. He was smiling widely, and his eyes were bright with genuine pleasure. "I was hoping I'd find you here," he said as he reached her. "How have you been? It's been months since we talked." Velathana could not speak. She stared at him with her silver eyes, searching for some sign of deception. This had to be a mistake. He could not actually remember her. No one remembered her. "You," she started, then stopped. Her voice sounded strange in her own ears. "You remember my name?" Danny looked confused by the question. "Of course I remember your name. Why wouldn't I?" "Because no one ever does." The words came out before she could stop them. They hung in the air between them, heavy with centuries of loneliness. Velathana felt her face grow warm with shame. She should not have said that. It was not proper. It was not dignified. But Danny's expression changed. The smile faded, replaced by something softer, something like understanding. "That's terrible," he said quietly. "I'm sorry, that must be very lonely." No one had ever said they were sorry before. No one had ever acknowledged that her invisibility was wrong. Velathana felt something crack inside her chest, like ice breaking on a frozen lake. "I brought you something," Danny said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small paper cup with a lid on top. Steam rose from a tiny hole in the lid. "It's called coffee. It's a drink from Earth. I mentioned it once to someone from the Korvathi delegation, and they looked at me like I was insane. But I thought you might want to try it. You seemed curious about human culture when we first met." Velathana took the cup. It was warm in her hands. A strange, rich smell rose from the hole in the lid. "I remember you said you were interested in stellar cartography," Danny continued. "Have you had a chance to see the new maps from the Outer Rim survey? I heard they discovered some amazing nebulae out there." She had mentioned her interest in stellar cartography once, 3 months ago, in a conversation that lasted less than 10 minutes. He remembered. Yes," she managed to say. "I have seen the new maps. The nebulae are beautiful. I'd love to hear about them sometime if you're willing to share. I don't know much about astronomy, but I find it fascinating. Danny talked to her for over an hour. He asked about her work, her interests, her opinions on the assembly. He told her about Earth, about the blue oceans and green forests, and the way the sun looked when it set over the mountains. He introduced her to two other members of his delegation who had come to the celebration, and they both called her by her correct name, without hesitation. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Velathana laughed. It was a small sound, rusty from lack of use, but it was real. When the celebration began to end and the crowd started to leave, Danny shook her hand again. "This was wonderful," he said. "I really hope we can talk again soon, Princess Velathana." She watched him walk away through the thinning crowd. Her hand still felt warm where he had touched it. The coffee cup was empty, but she held on to it anyway. Something had happened tonight. Something she did not fully understand. A human. A member of a species that everyone called primitive and unimportant had done something that no one else in the galaxy had done in 300 years. He had seen her. He had remembered her. And he had come looking for her. Not because he needed something from her, but simply because he wanted to talk to her. Velathana walked back to her quarters in a daze. She placed the empty coffee cup on a shelf beside her star charts. She stood at her window and looked out at the darkness of space. For the first time in centuries, she felt something that she had forgotten how to feel. She felt hope. Velathana began to visit the human delegation. She told herself it was only curiosity. Humans were a new species. It was natural to want to learn about them. It was part of her duty as a member of the royal family to understand the new cultures that joined the assembly. There was nothing strange about her visits, nothing personal, but she knew this was a lie. The truth was that she wanted to feel what she had felt at the celebration. She wanted someone to say her name again. She wanted to talk to people who actually listened when she spoke. She wanted to be seen. The human quarters were small compared to the grand halls of the Netherian sections. They had simple furniture and plain walls decorated with pictures and flags. But there was something warm about the space. Something alive. Humans left personal items everywhere. Books, photographs, small objects that had no practical purpose but clearly meant something to their owners. Danny welcomed her every time she visited. He always greeted her by her full name, and he always asked how she was doing before talking about anything else. He introduced her to the other members of the delegation, and each one of them remembered her name after being told only once. Lieutenant Grace Holloway was the pilot of the human ship. She was a tall woman with short red hair and a quick smile. She showed Velathana pictures of every ship she had ever served on, naming each crew member and telling stories about them. When Velathana asked how she could remember so many people, Grace looked surprised. "They're my crew," Grace said simply. "How could I forget them?" Dr. Ben Okafor was the delegation's scientist. He was a large man with dark skin and a gentle voice. He kept detailed journals filled with notes about every alien species he encountered. Not just scientific observations, but personal details. Their favorite foods, their family traditions, their hopes and dreams. He showed Velathana his notes about her and asked if he had written anything wrong. No one had ever taken notes about her before. No one had ever cared enough to remember the details of her life. Commander Kyle Ruiz was the delegation's security officer. He was a serious man with a stern face, but his eyes were kind. He carried a worn photograph in his pocket, and he showed it to Velathana within minutes of meeting her. The photograph showed a small human child with dark curly hair and a gap-toothed smile. "That's my daughter, Megan," Kyle said. His stern face softened when he spoke about her. "She's 7 years old. She wanted to come with us. But space travel is too dangerous for children." I call her every week using the long-range communication system. She tells me about school and her friends and her pet cat named Whiskers. Veilithana looked at the photograph. The child's smile was bright and pure. She seems happy, she said. She is, Kyle agreed. She's the best thing that ever happened to me. Over the weeks that followed, Veilithana learned more about humans. She learned that they celebrated something called birthdays, where friends and family gathered once a year to remember the day a person was born. They gave gifts. They sang songs. They made the person feel special and loved. She learned that humans kept photographs of people they cared about, carrying their images across the vast distances of space so they would never be forgotten. She learned that humans wrote letters to each other, long messages filled with personal thoughts and feelings, even when they could have used faster forms of communication. There was something important to them about the act of writing, about the time and care it required. She learned that humans had a saying, to forget someone's name is to forget their existence. They believed that remembering people was one of the most important things a person could do. On Earth, Danny explained one evening, we have a word for people who forget names and faces easily. We call them rude. It's considered a social failure, a sign that you don't care about others. Veilithana sat in silence for a long moment. She thought about the 300 years she had spent among her own people. She thought about the countless times her name had been forgotten, mispronounced, or simply ignored. She thought about the way her family called her seventh, as if she were a number instead of a person. Among my people, she said slowly, names are considered unimportant. Only titles and ranks matter. Only power matters. Danny frowned. That's sad. Names are how we recognize each other as individuals. Without names, we're just categories, groups, not real people. I think, Veilithana said, that is exactly how my people see each other. As categories, as tools, not as individuals worth remembering. She felt a strange sensation in her eyes. Moisture was gathering there, threatening to fall. She had not cried in over 100 years. She had forgotten that she could. Hey, Danny said softly. He reached out and touched her arm. His hand was warm. You're not a category to us. You're Veilithana, our friend. The word hit her like a physical force. Friend. She had never had a friend before. She had never known what the word truly meant. That night she lay awake in her quarters, staring at the ceiling. She thought about what she had learned. She thought about the humans and their strange, beautiful way of seeing the world. They remembered everyone. They cherished individuals. They believed that every person mattered, regardless of their rank or power. It was such a simple thing, such an obvious thing. And yet no one in her long life had ever shown her this kind of care. She thought about her family. Her father, the emperor, who had forgotten she existed. Her siblings, who saw her only as an obstacle or a tool. Her entire species, who valued power and position above all else. She thought about the humans. Danny, who wrote her name in his notebook. Grace, who remembered every crew member she had ever served with. Ben, who took notes about people's dreams. Kyle, who carried his daughter's picture across the stars. Something was changing inside her. A wall that she had built long ago was starting to crack. Behind that wall were feelings she had buried for centuries, pain and loneliness and a desperate hunger to be seen, to be known, to matter to someone. The humans had found a way through that wall. They had done it without trying, simply by being who they were. Simply by caring. Veilithana closed her eyes. A single tear rolled down her blue cheek. For the first time in 300 years, she did not feel alone. The conspiracy revealed itself to Veilithana because no one remembered she was there. She had been walking through the private halls of the Netherian royal section, returning from a meeting with the human delegation. The hour was late, and the halls were nearly empty. She turned a corner and found herself near the entrance to one of her father's private meeting chambers. The door was slightly open. Voices drifted out into the hallway. Veilithana recognized them immediately. Her eldest brother, Prince Kotharavian, her second sister, Princess Mirazethia, and Lord Vornaketh, the head of the Imperial Intelligence Service. She knew she should walk away. Private meetings were not her concern. But something in their tone made her pause. They sounded excited, eager, dangerous. "The plan is perfect," Lord Vornaketh was saying. "We strike during the Assembly's opening ceremony next week. The humans will be blamed for the attack. Their primitive technology will make them easy targets." "And the evidence?" Prince Kothravian asked. "Already prepared. We have fabricated communications, falsified weapon signatures, and 3 witnesses who will testify that they saw humans planting the explosives. By the time anyone realizes the truth, the humans will be destroyed and their planet will be under our control." Veilithana felt ice form in her stomach. She pressed herself against the wall, barely breathing, listening as her family discussed genocide. The plan was simple and terrible. A faction within the Netherian court had grown afraid of humanity's rapid advancement. The humans were primitive now, but they learned quickly. Too quickly. In a few centuries, they might become a real power. Better to destroy them now, while they were still weak. The attack would target the Korvathi delegation as well, making it look like the humans had tried to reignite the old war between the Korvathi and Netherian empires. Both species would demand justice. The humans would be wiped out, and the Netherian empire would expand its influence by restoring peace. "What about our father?" Princess Mirazethia asked. "The Emperor will be convinced that the evidence is real," Lord Vornaketh replied. "He trusts his intelligence service completely. He will authorize the retaliation himself, never knowing that we created the crime." Veilithana's hands trembled. She thought about Danny and his warm smile. She thought about Grace and her photographs of crew members. She thought about Ben and his careful notes. She thought about Kyle and the picture of his daughter in his pocket. Megan, 7 years old, waiting for her father to come home. They would all die. Every human on the station would be killed in the first strike. Then Earth itself would be destroyed. Billions of people who remembered names, who celebrated birthdays, who carried photographs of loved ones across the stars, all because a few members of her family were afraid of what humanity might become. Veilithana walked away in silence. No one noticed her. No one ever did. She spent 3 days alone in her quarters, struggling with her choice. If she spoke, she would be betraying her own family, her own people. She would be a traitor, and traitors in the Netherian Empire faced death or exile. Everything she had known, everything she had been, would be destroyed. But if she stayed silent, the humans would die. Her friends would die. The only people who had ever truly seen her, who had ever cared about her as a person, would be killed by her own family's hands. She thought about what Danny had said. "You're not a category to us. You're Veilithana, our friend." She thought about what Kyle had said. "She's the best thing that ever happened to me." She thought about the empty coffee cup still sitting on her shelf. A small reminder of the night someone had come looking for her simply because they wanted to talk. On the 4th day, she made her decision. The attack came during the opening ceremony of the Assembly's new session. The Grand Hall was filled with thousands of delegates from hundreds of species. The human delegation sat in their assigned section, unaware that bombs had been planted beneath their seats, but the bombs did not explode. 20 minutes before the ceremony began, Vale Thana had sent an encrypted message to Danny Cortez. She had included everything she knew: the plan, the evidence, the names of the conspirators. She had told him to evacuate his people immediately and to broadcast the information across every channel in the assembly. The humans moved fast, faster than anyone expected from a primitive species. Within minutes, they had cleared their section and sealed themselves inside their ship. Their communications officer had broken through the assembly's broadcast system and sent Vale Ethana's message to every screen, every speaker, every device on the station. The truth spread like fire. Assembly security forces swarmed the Grand Hall. The fake evidence was analyzed and proven false. The conspirators were arrested, including Prince Kothravian and Princess Mira Sethia. Lord Vorniketh tried to flee but was captured at a docking port. And in the chaos, one name was spoken again and again: the name of the informant, the traitor who had revealed the plot: Princess Vale Ethana Soraiketh. Her father summoned her to the throne room that night. He sat on his ancient seat of power, his face carved from stone, his eyes burning with cold fury. For the first time in 47 years, he looked directly at her. "You have betrayed your family," Emperor Kothmaven said. "You have betrayed your people. You have brought shame upon the empire." Vale Ethana stood before him, her head held high. She did not apologize. She did not explain. She simply waited. "You are no longer my daughter," the Emperor continued. "You are no longer a princess. You are no longer Netherian. Your name is erased from our records. Your existence is denied. You are exiled from our space forever." Guards stepped forward to escort her away. They did not touch her roughly, but their grips were firm. She was led to a small transport ship and sent to a neutral station at the edge of assembly space. She arrived alone. She had nothing except the clothes she wore. No money, no possessions, no family, no home. She walked through the crowded corridors of the neutral station, invisible once again. Thousands of beings passed by without looking at her. She found an empty corner near a viewport and sat down on the cold floor. For the first time in her life, she had nowhere to go. She had saved the humans. She had stopped the conspiracy. She had done the right thing. But now, she was truly alone. Vale Ethana sat in the same corner of the neutral station for 3 days. She did not eat. She did not sleep. She simply watched the beings pass by, their faces blurring together into a stream of movement and noise. Some of them looked at her with curiosity. Most did not look at her at all. She had expected this. She had prepared herself for it. She had known when she sent that message to Danny that she was trading her old life for nothing. The humans would survive, but she would be cast out. It was a fair exchange. The lives of billions of innocent people were worth more than the comfort of one forgotten princess. She did not regret her choice, but she felt the weight of it pressing down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. On the morning of the 4th day, she heard footsteps approaching. They were heavier than the footsteps of most species, with a particular rhythm that she had learned to recognize. Human footsteps. She looked up. Danny Cortez stood before her. He wore his simple dark suit, slightly wrinkled from travel. His leather notebook was tucked under his arm, as always. His eyes were tired but warm, and his smile was the same smile she remembered from their first meeting. "Princess Vale Ethana Soraiketh," he said softly. "We've been looking everywhere for you." Vale Ethana stared at him. Her silver eyes were dull and empty. She had not expected anyone to come for her. She had not expected to see him again. "I am not a princess anymore," she said. Her voice sounded strange, rough from days of silence. "I have no title, no name. I am nothing. Danny crouched down beside her. He reached out and took her hand in his. His skin was warm against her cool blue fingers. You saved our lives, he said. All of us. Everyone on Earth. 8 billion people who will never know your name, but who are alive because of what you did. I did what was right, she said. That is all. That's everything, Danny replied. And we don't forget people who do the right thing, especially when it costs them everything. He helped her to her feet. Her legs were weak from sitting for so long, and she leaned against him for support. He did not seem to mind. Earth has granted you asylum, Danny said. Full citizenship if you wanted a home. A place to belong. The United Nations voted unanimously. Even the countries that never agree on anything agreed on this. Vale Ithana blinked. She could not understand what he was saying. Why would your people do this? I am not human. I am not one of you. Danny smiled. You're our friend, and we don't forget our friends. Behind him, the doors of the station opened. Grace Holloway walked through, followed by Ben Okafor and Kyle Ruiz. They all looked tired and worried, and they all looked relieved when they saw her. Grace was the first to reach her. The tall pilot wrapped her arms around Vale Ithana in a tight embrace. It was a human custom called a hug. Vale Ithana had read about it but had never experienced it. The warmth and pressure were strange but comforting. Don't ever scare us like that again, Grace said. We spent 3 days searching every station in this sector. Ben was next. He pulled out his journal and showed her a page covered in notes. I've been updating my records, he said. I added a new section about you, about everything you did. I want to make sure it's accurate. Would you mind checking it later? Kyle simply nodded at her, his stern face softening. My daughter wants to meet you, he said. I told her about you in my last message. She drew you a picture. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket and handed it to Vale Ithana. She opened it carefully. The picture showed a tall blue figure with silver eyes standing next to a small brown figure with curly hair. Both figures were smiling. Above them, in uneven letters that slanted to the right, was written, Thank you for saving my daddy. At the bottom of the page, in the same childish handwriting, was Vale Ithana's full name. Every letter, every syllable, written out carefully and correctly. Something broke inside Vale Ithana. All the walls she had built, all the barriers she had maintained for 300 years, crumbled into dust. Tears rolled down her blue cheeks, falling like rain. Her shoulders shook with sobs. Grace held her. Danny placed a hand on her back. Ben and Kyle stood close, their presence solid and reassuring. They did not tell her to stop crying. They did not seem uncomfortable or embarrassed. They simply stayed with her, letting her feel whatever she needed to feel. Come home with us, Danny said gently. Let us take care of you for a while. The journey to Earth took several weeks. Vale Ithana spent the time learning about her new home. She studied human history, human culture, human art, and music and food. She learned about their wars and their kindnesses, their failures and their triumphs. They were not a perfect species. They made mistakes. They hurt each other sometimes. But they also loved each other with a fierce and stubborn devotion. They built hospitals and schools and libraries. They created beauty just for the sake of beauty. They crossed oceans and climbed mountains and reached for the stars because they believed that anything was possible. They remembered names. When the ship finally entered Earth's orbit, Vale Ithana stood at the viewport and watched the blue planet grow larger. It was beautiful, this small world. Green and brown and blue, wrapped in white clouds, glowing in the light of a yellow sun. Her new home. The first weeks were overwhelming. There were ceremonies and speeches and interviews. Leaders from every country wanted to meet her. News organizations wanted to tell her story. Children sent her letters and drawings from all over the world. But eventually, things calmed down. Veilithana was given a small house near the ocean, in a place called California. Grace taught her to fly atmospheric vehicles. Ben invited her to his family's home for something called Thanksgiving, where they ate too much food and talked for hours about nothing important. Kyle's daughter Megan visited every weekend, bringing new drawings and endless questions about space. One evening, many months after her arrival, Veilithana was invited to speak at a cultural exchange event at a local university. The room was filled with humans of all ages, their faces bright with curiosity. When she walked to the podium, the crowd fell silent. Hundreds of eyes watched her. Hundreds of people who knew her name, her story, her sacrifice. "My name is Veilithana Soraiketh," she said, her voice clear and strong. "It means light that returns after darkness. For 300 years, I thought that name was meaningless. I thought I was meaningless. I lived among billions of beings, and none of them remembered that I existed." She paused. Her silver eyes swept across the audience. "Then I met humans, a species that everyone called primitive, unimportant, forgettable." She smiled softly. "But you remembered me. You saw me when no one else did. You taught me that every person matters. Every name matters. Every life is worth remembering." She looked down at the front row, where Danny and Grace and Ben and Kyle were sitting, where Megan sat beside her father, waving with both hands. "I spent 3 centuries learning that I was invisible," Veilithana said. "I spent 1 year with humans learning that I was wrong." She took a deep breath. Her eyes were shining, but she did not cry. She was done with tears. "My name is Veilithana Soraiketh," she said again, "and for the first time in my life, I know that someone will remember it." The room erupted in applause. The sound washed over her like warm light, like coming home after a long journey in the dark. She stood at the podium and let herself feel it, the joy, the belonging, the love. She was no longer forgotten. She was no longer invisible. She was seen, and she would never be alone again.